here's the interesting thing. In 2015, the difference between older people, and they're defining that as 55 years and older, versus younger people, 16 to 34, were not that different. So, for example, in 2015, for adults who were over 55, 42% of their media consumption was digital, online publications, podcasts, things like that. 58% was non-digital, traditional newspapers, things like that. Now, in 2019, it's 50-50. So it has moved more towards the digital. It's gone from 42% digital to 50%. But things are a little bit different when it comes to younger people, age 16 through 34. So in 2015, it was still, even 5 years ago, a majority digital daily habits when it came to media consumption. 59% of media consumption of younger people, these were millennials plus a few years, they had a 59% digital media consumption, 41% non-digital, things like paper books and newspapers. But in 2019, the digital has grown to 73%. The non-digital is only 27%. So it's now 27% non-digital for younger people, whereas for older people in my generation, it's still 50% who are consuming non-digital media. What are the implications for this? Well, in the political world, it's very clear that it's much, much harder for politicians to speak the truth, to get the truth out. For politicians willing to lie, it's much easier because lies spread like crazy on social media. The bigger lie, the better lie, often the more effective it is. Again, we're not here to talk about politics or any one party or certainly any one candidate. But there's also, in the last 5 years, as the media world has shifted from traditional media with hierarchies and traditional forms of journalism to the free-for-all of digital, there's been massive changes in the political scene around the world, not just the United States, but in many democracies around the world. Vast changes of power and things that previously many thought could not have happened. It's being enabled by different type of media and different types of media consumption, because especially young people under the ages of 34 years old quite often have never even read an editorial page of a major newspaper. I'm not saying in and of itself that's a bad thing. There's a lot of bad editorial pages in the world. But it's never been easier to only hear what you want to hear and to only hear information that reaffirms what you want to believe. This, I think, is troubling not only for democracy, but it's also troubling from the standpoint of personal development, those of us who want to build habits, because what we're seeing now, especially as it relates to diets, some of you on TikTok and others were commenting on various diets. We've seen conversations about diets sort of mimic conversations that have happened around politics. You have tribes of people who are so passionate. Of course, you have to go keto, and anyone who doesn't do keto is killing themselves, basically. And you have other people equally as passionate. And the truth is, there's a lot of different scientific information out there that is contradictory. And it's easy if you decide you only want to do the Tim Ferriss diet, or you only want to do the Mediterranean diet, or you only want to do the paleo diet. It's going to be easier and easier to surround yourself all day long with digital media to just reinforce things that you want to hear and that make you feel better about what you already thought. This can be a problem. It can be a big problem for individuals trying to get better, because you've got a particular selection bias. You're only selecting things that are telling you what you want to hear. So we'll be talking about that more on this program in the weeks, months, and years to come. By the way, I do hope that this show continues for years. One of the interesting things about talk shows is that when they work, they can work a long time. Now, you need to be interesting. You've got to have your heart into it. But I'm going to bring up a name. I don't normally like to reference politics at all. But there is a host, a well-known American, forgive me for those of you outside of the country, the U.S., because most of you are not in the U.S. There's a very, very famous political talk show host in America by the name of Rush Limbaugh. Now, he's highly polarizing. And truth be told, I don't like to get into politics here, but he and I don't really share the same politics. But I do admire his work ethic in the sense that he has done a daily 3-hour radio show now for about 31 years. And interestingly, one of his first initial stations when he started syndicating live in 1987, I guess it's about 33 years now he's been on, and was one of his initial stations was a tiny station in Tallahassee, Florida, where I happened to be a host. And I was making the princely sum of $5 a day hosting a 1-hour political talk show. Things turned out a little better for him. He's now made billions of dollars. He's in the news this week. He's announced that he has advanced lung cancer and is going to have to take some time away from his show, but is stressed he's not retiring. And that is one of the things I find interesting about talk show host is once they have a show and they like it and they have a relationship with their audience, they don't ever retire. John McLaughlin, another American political talk show host, died just a couple of years ago, and he had broadcast a show on Sunday and he died like on a Wednesday. He was on the air till the very, and he was about that many days away from turning 90. Pat Robertson, another very famous American talk show host and broadcaster, also of the political and religious right, has been doing a show almost daily since 1960. So he's almost 90 years old. So my point is, there's something about actually talking to people, sharing a worldview, trying to help people understand things. Again, even if you dislike, I'm giving some political examples that are highly controversial within the U.S., so I'm not advocating any of their stances. I'm simply saying the sheer act of speaking to people, reaching people, connecting to people, seems to keep people alive a long time and keep them very engaged and enjoying what they do. Now, we don't all have to become talk show hosts. And yeah, maybe you do need a bigger ego than most to do this for certainly 2 or 3 hours a day. But I do think we as human beings need a creative outlet. There's something about creating ideas, sharing them with the world. Every talk show host does that. Every artist does that. Every novelist does that. Every software developer does that. What's the passion inside you that is burning where you want to create something to share the world? I do think that not all good habits are equal. Some are more important than others. And this habit of creating on a regular basis is such a good habit. It often creates a ripple effect of 30 other good habits. For example, I like doing this show. I'm trying to do the best I can, but the sheer fact that I'm doing this show forces me to organize everything else in my day, forces me to read another dozen books on habits every week, forces me to read every other story about habits, forces me to, there's so many things I can't do poorly anymore if I'm going to do this one thing of hosting a show for you. So I'm grateful to you for spending time with me today. It helps me. I'm hoping it helps you too.